All right. Thank you, everyone, and welcome, and thanks for joining us today. My name's Alison Marnie from Dulux Property Services. I just wanted to start off by saying, you know, that it's great to be here. We've got a long relationship with Procurement Australasia and their members over 20 years. But what we want to do more of is help provide value for the members via these webinars and helping you with our products and services and painting and maintaining your properties. So we hope that today answers some of those questions around painting in-house and things to consider and our products. And what we'd love to do is invite you to join our online poll, which we've got going on, where we ask you questions and you can answer your responses. So in that pink little box, you'll see there an address, www.menti.com. So if you go to that address on your mobile phone and type in that code, we can receive your answers, and you know, it's a really interactive session. So pop that up and you'll be into our questions, and we'll ask those as we go through. So the first question to kick us off, if you've been able to get that Menti address up, is, you know, I'd love to know from our audience that's here is what proportion of your painting is completed in-house. Interesting, you know, to understand how much of it you're having your maintenance team or yourself complete. So we've got a scale of less than 30%, or 30 to 50%, or 50 to 70%, or more than 70%. So we'd love to know, you know, what proportion you're doing yourselves. And it looks like we've got some answers already, which is great. It looks like less than 30%. So what we tend to find is things like toilet blocks, you know, corridors, you know, interior areas that are kind of touch up, we find is painted in-house by, you know, maintenance teams. But what we find is when it's an exterior or a bigger project or a complete refurbishment, it does get, you know, outsourced, which is for good reason. So great to know that some of you are doing some of your painting, and hopefully by the end today you'll know a little bit more about products that is relevant for that. So the other question which we wanted to ask, if we go to our next Mentimeter question, is what's the most common issue you face when you're painting in-house? You know, for me, I painted my window trim just last week actually, and I tell you what, the paint drips and it's called sagging, and using too much paint in some areas and not enough in others is really obvious, and it's probably why I should have got somebody to paint it instead of me. But let's have a look at some of your answers which we've got that we'd love to hear about. So we've got stains. Yes, agreed. Blocking stains is a really important issue, and if you don't use the right primer, those stains will just keep bleeding through, so that's a good one. Staff capability, that's a really good point, and it also goes hand in hand with the next one around, you know, work health and safety complications. You know, there is a reason that painters exist, and often it's because they've considered those access and health and safety issues, you know, and they have insurances for those, so it's a really important one to consider when you face, and we'll be able to talk about that a bit more later when you're painting. Waterproofing, that's a really big issue with buildings. I think it's about 80% of all building defects that we see most commonly, and we can talk to that today. Rusting, so rusting coming through in your coatings, that's a really common issue that we can make sure that we cover off today. And last couple, we've got peeling and preparation. So actually, peeling is a result of poor preparation. So, you know, peeling is often a result of dirt or grime coming under the paint coating and popping it off. And, you know, one of the things we'll talk about today is preparation is often the part of painting that takes you the most time, but it's the most important in making sure your paint coating stays on and stays looking great. So some great issues that we will cover off today, and thanks for your answers, team. So just a couple of things we wanted to open up straight off the bat with some tips for in-house painting. I think the first thing that's really important to note is that paint failure, so where you see those peeling, blistering, flaking, you know, watermarks down the wall, where you see issues with paint, often it's a sign of remedial works that need to occur to your building, and that's actually outside of the paint coating. And so painting over these issues won't solve them. So what you'll find is you might paint over some kind of a stain that's coming down your wall and wonder why that stain appears, you know, up to a year or less or later. So we really wanted to kind of flag here that it's really important to get an engineer or a building specialist to do an assessment where you've got signs of remedial issues. That's probably the first thing. And you can get engineers, but you can also get building inspectors, etc., to give you a report. And it's a couple $100, but it's really worthwhile, particularly if you're managing a property portfolio. It's actually really valuable to you to know these issues. And we'll talk about those issues in just a little while as well, just to help, you know, flag what they are. And we've already said, we already saw in the Menti poll, preparation is king. So I would almost go so far, team, as to say that almost all, or no, a lot of problems that you see when you have these flaking and peeling and things relates to preparation. And that really is washing and sanding. So if you think about it, if you paint over, say, some oil that's on your building or some dirt, what happens is that oil and dirt pops the paint off. And that's what happens when you've got, you know, paint that flakes off. It's that oil and grime has got it under the coating, and it was already there, or it's got under and it's popping that coating off. So cannot stress enough that washing your buildings prior to painting and sanding them helps to rough it up so that the paint sticks to the surface. But you know, washing your building is really important prior to painting. And actually, just on that washing your buildings regularly is really important as well. It's something that I would argue almost, you know, very, very few proper businesses we talk to wash their buildings. And it's one of the simplest things you can do to make your paint last longer. And really simply, washing your buildings reduces grime and salt buildup and, you know, pollution. And if you live near the ocean or in a climate kind of, a coastal suburb, it's salts that actually attack your painting. So, you know, you can get away with washing your building for much less than it costs you to recoat that property. And if we recommend you wash your buildings about every 18 months to 2 years, but hey, look, even if you did it every 5 years, it will still help your coating look better and last longer. So you'll see a gentleman up the top there washing that building. Again, that's one message we really hope that you take out from today. And you know, a story about that is, remember we talked about this before, is, you know, Flinders Street Station was going to be painted. It was actually only painted last year, but they washed the building about in 2004 because they were going to get ready to paint it again, and it looked so good once they washed it. They actually didn't paint it till last year. So again, washing is really important, and it really can, you know, extend the life of your paint. Use enough paint. That's really important. What we find with paint is you need a film thickness. So you need a certain amount of thickness of the paint for it to get the properties that the paint is designed for. If you don't use enough, not only will you not cover the surface properly, but you won't get the properties like, you know, or the colorability that you are hoping for. So using enough paint, get the roller really loaded, and make sure you paint it with lots of paint. use the right paint for the substrate. So substrate is another word for surface. So Jacob and I will talk about that today. And the right quality. I mean, you know, if there's one thing we hope that you get out of today, it's that, you know, the paint on a property is the most enduring part of a paint project. But it's often the one that you think, oh, I might save money to go to a, you know, cheaper brand. But actually, you know, if the process of painting is the part that costs you the most, actually spending a little bit more on the most enduring part, the paint, really is worth it in the long run. And we'll talk about that in dollar value in just a little minute. Consider the color you use, really important. If you know, darker colors are all the rage, but they fade quicker. And actually, some of these really dark colors can actually even heat the substrate up quicker and damage the substrate. The other thing as well is, yeah, again, darker colors fade quicker. So, you know, that really nice dark color that you really like, it can, you know, not look as dark as time goes on. However, we do a lot of work in the color fade space. So actually our colors will fade less, they'll fade more evenly, and they'll fade, you know, much slower. So you know, we do lead in that, but it is worth considering. All paints fade over time. And then the last one for considerations is consider access. So somebody mentioned in those questions at the beginning is what, you know, occupational health and safety around painting. You know, if it's not easily accessible, we recommend don't do it yourself. Because actually access is usually what you are paying for when you get a painter in. That's usually what the cost is. So, you know, because it's the most risky, and a lot of, you know, work needs to go into safety considerations for painters. So, you know, we recommend get the experts in when it's not easy to access. Anything else you wanted to add to that, Jacob?
No, I think that covers off the majority of it. Just kind of on a side note, everyone, we do through Property Service and through Procurement Australia have someone in each state who can visit your property and talk through these points to put together a specification, which will help choose kind of as we go through this presentation and we talk through the products, we'll make it specific to your own buildings to ideally reduce your maintenance costs.
Hey, I liked one of our comments in the chat there, which was saying we don't employ any painters. We have general handyman, and can sometimes cause issue with a poor end product. When you employ a contractor, you get professional painters. It's cheaper and faster, and that's a really good kind of sentiment we find. You know, sometimes people underestimate painting and the problems that it can cause you, you know, that might not appear right away, actually will save you in the long run to just get a professional to do it. Okay, so common building defects. So it'd be interesting to know how much experience we kind of have with this, but on the right, we've got the most common building defects that impact strata properties. And it's what I kind of said before around painting over these issues. So you'll see some of the pictures on the left, which are the ones we see most commonly that relate to painting. But painting over any of these issues will not make them go away. And there's so many body corporates that we talk to who would love to just paint over these issues. But again, you're almost wasting your money because these building issues will only deteriorate further. So interestingly, the biggest issues relate to water and, you know, either water leaks or waterproofing. So, you know, that's kind of 80% of building issues that are affecting our properties. Isn't that fascinating to think that that's to do with the way our buildings are waterproofed or lack of? The other one is internal and external wall cracking, and so you'll see this first picture on the left, which is cracking, and as the process with cracking is that concrete naturally expands and contracts as part of its normal kind of makeup, and as part of that, when water and salts get into those cracks and into the the metal structures in your building, you can see there those you know, rusted kind of metal spikes. It rusts them, and then the rust pops off the concrete and pops off the paint. And as you can see, it's affecting the structure of your property. That's making that balcony, you know, significantly unsafe. So cracking is the first sign you're going to see that will lead, if unchecked, to spalling, or concrete cancer is another term. And waterproofing is, you'll see here that's water kind of escaping and trying to come out, and that salts that you're seeing on the wall there that have escaped. The other one that's worth mentioning here is flammable cladding. You know, we all kind of were aware of this cladding issue that's come in, but the government probably has held off on providing the mandated solutions to that. But that flammable cladding issue won't go away. And so what we do have coatings that we can apply that help to make a building look like the aluminium panel it used to be, but certainly cladding is something, flammable cladding is something that we see is becoming more and more of an issue. Last one that I thought I'd quickly touch on is lead abatement. So we've got some new laws that came in, I think it was a year or two ago, around buildings only being allowed to have 0.1% lead content in their paint. And if there's any more than that, when you're painting a property, it needs to be stripped. So a lot of the defence contracts that we deal with, a lot of the government properties we deal with, who are wanting to repaint heritage properties, must actually strip it. And we've got products that can help with that. But that's worth thinking about, guys. Any buildings, I think, that are over about 50 years old are likely to have lead in their paint. And again, call us and we can help you if you're thinking about repainting properties. But that is a consideration, because technically it's illegal not to strip that paint off. And there's a process for stripping paint off safely, which we can help you with. And definitely don't do that yourself. That's something that we, you know, can provide experts to help. Again, don't paint over these building defects because they won't go away. All right, now what I might do is, we talked about, and maybe this question's already been answered, but what painting issue would you most like help with from us today? So if, before we said what's the most common issue that you see, what's the one that you want us to help talk through so that you've got a solution to it today? Okay, so we've got a couple of answers already, and we'll give you a bit of time to put those in. But cracking, that's great. We actually have a product that will help you with cracking, and we also have a product that will help with coastal longevity. It's actually the same product, and I'd even argue the same product for your exterior will help with mold. So that's great. We will be answering that today. We'll just wait for anyone else who might have an issue that they want us to have solved. Graffiti coverage. Well, you're in luck, because we've got a product that we're talking about today that that we will be able to talk to. So that's great.
Yeah, most of these will get covered today with the products that we'll talk through and a bit about why. The only one there that's if it's in regards to mold currently on buildings, that would fall more into our kind of primers. Most of what we're talking about in today's session will be the top coats, the final coats, but I can definitely touch base on the mold products there to put it into context as we move through. Yep.
All right, well, that's good. I'm happy if there's no other answers, or if they think they're covered, we're really confident we can answer your questions. So we might pop back over to the presentation. So this, a really complicated looking house, we just really wanted to start by saying we don't just provide kind of, I guess, paint. We actually provide a whole lot under the Dulux Group portfolio that it literally can help kind of with coatings for your whole property. So one of the, I'm not sure if anyone knew that we can provide garage doors, but we can even provide waterproofing and concrete repair solutions for those issues that we saw where concrete cancer comes in. So when you talk to Dulux, we can provide a range of products and a specification to solve a lot of these issues. But the ones we're going to talk about today are specifically these ones. These ones are the ones we think you're probably going to be using the most commonly, and the ones we thought we'd group into, exterior, interior, and metal protection, and a couple of specialty solutions. So we'll go straight into it. You don't have to read all this text. I appreciate there's a lot of text here, and what we will do is provide you this presentation for you to review it afterwards. But this is a great way to think about paint for the exterior of your property. There's kind of three different solutions. So if you look here where the red kind of box is highlighted, Dulux Weather Shield is probably our most used product, and it's a great, they call it a decorative paint, which is really good at UV protection. Most houses in Australia are painted in Weather Shield, and it's the most commonly used. So if I think about how thick that is, that's about 50 microns when you apply that coating, and you get a warranty of about 5 to 15 years. The next kind of product up, so if you're thinking good, better, best, is a product called Acrytex, AcryShield. So you're starting to get to a much thicker paint here. So as you can see, guys, you're seeing 150 microns, which is 3 times thicker than Weather Shield. And the reason you've got a thicker paint and why that's so beneficial for your property is that it's a stretchy coating that moves and flexes with your building. So if you think about those cracks that we saw in that picture before, this AcryShield actually bridges those cracks because it can stretch up to 9 times its own kind of weight. So if you think as your concrete's expanding, contracting and cracking, this paint is actually expanding and contracting with it. So we would argue if you've got concrete structures, you really should be using Acrytex because you'll hide those cracks for much longer than if you paint them with Weather Shield. The other thing to think about with Weather Shield is that Weather Shield's really great for all sorts of substrates or surfaces, and it's self-priming. AcryShield is really useful for concrete. I think it doesn't go on metal or steel, does it? Or timber?
Ideally not, no.
Ideally not. So actually a good example of where these two products are used, and I know I've already talked about Flinders Street, but see this picture, the front that you see there, which was painted last year, that was painted all in AcryShield. And the back of the structure, which is actually pressed metal. So the facade on the back of Flinders Street that faces the platforms is literally a pretend facade of kind of metal that's painted in Weather Shield. So in that instance, with the different substrates is where those different products are relevant. But that Flinders Street station, the last time it was painted was 25 years ago in our product. So that's a product that really has stood the test of time. Now, if you really want to not have to touch your property in a long time, AcrySkin is literally another version of AcryShield, but it's much thicker. So you've got 300 microns. So that's 6 times as thick as Weather Shield. And again, you're talking a longer life because it's such a good, thick, protective paint. The other thing to note is because it's protecting those cracks, you're not getting water coming in and out and those salts leaching out of your paint. So it's a membrane paint that helps protect your properties. So I won't go on any more about that, but I will get Jacob to just quickly touch on what's worth considering when you use these products, because there is a little bit of a difference in applying Weather Shield and a membrane type coating.
So to kind of break it down, the Weather Shield is pretty much kind of the top of the line that we sell through Bunnings. Really easy to use, contractors, super contractor friendly, super DIY friendly. But it does have its limitations, and crack bridging is one of those. Ideally, when we kind of specify the properties, we'll choose the one that's most recommended for that type of substrate, and for the type of building it is. So Weather Shield, really easy to apply, really quick drying, few coats in the same day. Most contractors will be really happy to use it. When we move up to AcryShield, they do get a little bit harder to use. So again, when you're tendering to contractors and products like these are specified, making sure that the contractors know how to use them, because they are a little bit harder, is really important. Because they are so thick, it's a bit harder to use if you've got access, but whether via abseiling, so making sure, again, contractors are good at using the product, as well as leaving lap marks, which are kind of the big roller marks that you can see on your properties as you go over them, but a really good product. So when you're talking about kind of the price for the product, so an Acra Shield, an Acra Skin drum, again, would be cheaper per 15 litre than the Weather Shield is, but they're going much less far on the substrate. So you're kind of getting half as much out of the Acra Shield and then a quarter as much out of an Acra Skin per bucket. So again, just being mindful of that as you move through your projects.
Take myself on mute, and that's because, as you guys can imagine, a thicker paint you don't get as much coverage of, and that's worth noting. That's where the skill is in applying those Acra Shield and Acra Skin, is actually in making it look even, because it's a much thicker paint. So, quick Mentimeter question is, I'm just curious if everybody knew the difference between a decorative, which is the Weather Shield, and a membrane, which is the Acra Shield and the Acra Skin paints. So just keen to know if everybody knew that. It's a question that, oh look, we've got half, well, 1 and 1. Anyone? We'll just wait for a couple more answers. Oh look, looks like we're kind of split down the middle or getting a few more no's. But that's a really valuable thing to note, is that, you know, when you're getting a painter quote, Acra Shield price will be a little bit more than Weather Shield price, because it's going to take them longer to apply. That's great. The other thing that's worth noting, Acra Shield and Acra Skin are self-cleaning, so they will help you with when it rains, they actually clean themselves, which is great. We still recommend washing though, but you won't have to wash as much. Because I'm just thinking back to the questions. Remember, somebody asked before about cracking. That will help with crack bridging, and you'll have much longer time between when you see cracks with Acra Shield versus Weather Shield. So we might pop back to the presentation. Sounds good. Hopefully you've learned that. One last thing to note on these exterior solutions is, so if you're paying somebody to paint your property, as I mentioned, it will cost you about the same in paint for the membrane, but actually it will cost you a little more to apply it because of the labour that's involved. But what you'll find is, if you look at the life over the 10 years of your property, painting it less is what saves you. So every recoat cycle is what you're kind of spending your money on. So the more cycles, the higher the life cycle costs of painting. So invest in a quality paint system to reduce recoat cycles, and that actually reduces your property costs over the 10 years. So I hope that makes sense, everyone. But with Weather Shield, you'll probably be touching up and painting maybe one coat a little bit more frequently, but getting somebody out to do that more times is what costs you in the end. So that's a really good lesson for you to learn when a painter is saying, oh, I can do Weather Shield for you. It's still a great solution. It's the most widely solution. But ultimately, if you want to save money over your property's life, we recommend the next step up. So now we've kind of covered exterior, and again, we don't want to go into too much detail because you don't have to be paint experts. We can help you. But the next one we wanted to talk about was metal protection. This gets a little more complicated as far as applying. And again, if you think about the products that you can use to paint metal, we've got super enamel, which actually can go on doors and trims as well, but it's a metal protection product. Metal Shield. So these two products you can get in Bunnings. But as you get more heavy duty and more commercial, we go to products called Weathermax and Duration. So what you'll see in those red boxes is that as you go up in corrosive environments, so environments where, you're going to have a lot of, environmental rust and things affecting the property, that's where you want to go to a heavier duty solution. So as I said, most people can probably apply Metal Shield and Super Enamel themselves. Jacob will talk a bit about applying Weather Max and Duration. We tend to find that's when you get probably a painter in, but it's not to say you can't. There's just a bit more involved around pot life and the finish that you get. So you'll see difference in microns as we go up. The one thing to note between this Weather Max and Duration is a water-based version. So it's much better for areas where there's traffic that is coming and going. So for instance, we've been painting Duration in a lot of prisons. I've actually got, which council did I have written out? So Margate Prison, who's one of the councils who purchased from us, they've used Duration because the prisoners have to come in much quicker. And so you find that it's much better to have a less solvent-based solution, which is, much safer. So Weather Max is a more of a solvent base, or a heavier duty, but you get the performance. So MCG is painted in Weather Max, and so is the cheese sticks that go over the Balti Bridge in Melbourne. So it's a really durable coating. Is there anything just we wanted to touch on, Jacob, around to consider with applying those?
Yeah, so kind of as Alison touched on, kind of from left to right of your screen, the Super Enamel is, again, kind of really simple to use. Single pack is kind of what it's called. Same with the Metal Shield. So single pack just means that you'll just mix it and brush it and put it on. And that's kind of the start of kind of oil-based products. So there is a little bit of rust inhibition there. So if you're putting it over your bollards or posts or things like that, it will do a little bit. They'll generally chalk pretty fast, which is kind of the white powdery substance, which can look like colour fade as well. And they'll get progressively better as we move kind of through the list. Metal Shield, again, is a heavier solvent, so a lot smellier than the Super Enamel. Higher VOC, for those of you who know, which is volatile organic compounds, which is just part of every painting product. Still pretty easy to use, and a lot more kind of rust inhibitive. And then we get into kind of the two really specialty products, Weather Max HPR, which is our kind of leading steel anti-corrosive system. So this one in particular is a polyurethane. So those of you who are trying to get a lot of colour or last out of your steel coatings, this is kind of almost your starting point. The other two are more interior friendly, or for some really minor things, but if you're really having issues in coastal or high traffic with air pollution, Weather Max is kind of your starting point. The Duration range is that in kind of water-based. So we've got that's kind of brand new to the market. So it'll meet all the Green Star ratings. It does have limitations again with use, so contractors have to be a lot more specialised to use this, even then in comparison to the Weather Max, mainly because these last two are both 2-pack, so you'll mix part A with part B and get about 60 minutes to put it on before it goes hard in the can. The water-based variant won't go hard in the can even if you're past its pot life, but the product won't work properly, so you really have to be careful when using it in that regard.
So thanks for that, Jacob. I might skip the next question, just conscious of keeping going. I was asking, hey, have you guys applied these before? I suspect if we're doing 30% or under ourselves, that probably Weather Max and Duration may not be ones you've applied before. Again, always talk to us and we'll provide our contact details if you're thinking about it, because we can help. We've got a whole team who's there to help with that. So we'll talk about interior coatings before we just go on to a couple of specialties, which is anti-graffiti and heritage, and then we'd really love to hear from you, from your questions. So interior, probably a little less complicated than those exterior and metal protection, categories we talked about. But a really interesting one because, when someone says to you, what's the difference between interior paints, sometimes people find it hard to articulate. So Dulux Professional is our is a paint that a whole lot of our painters use because it applies really well, really looks good, good for touch up, and a really good kind of competitive price product. Really valuable and useful. I guess the difference between professional and wash and wear is probably, as the name suggests, in wash and wear. You get much more washability and durability with wash and wear than you would with a Dulux professional paint. Professional paint will look nice once it's been painted, and it will have some stain resistance, but certainly not the level that wash and wear does, which is specifically designed for, you know, high traffic areas. So that's kind of worth noting. Painters prefer the paint that gets them in and out quickly and looks good. We prefer, mum and dad, you know, prefer in their house the paint that's going to actually last longer. So that's kind of the difference there. And actually kind of really relevant to now is this SteriGuard product. So I would be curious, one of my questions is whether you've heard of this product. This is a product that's so much more relevant now that we have coronavirus upon us. It's actually a more durable product than wash and wear. So it's your next level up. It's got much better scrub resistance. So when you scrub paint, obviously the paint wears away. This has got much better scrub resistance. And also it's got a really good biocide or kind of antibacterial agent in it that prevents mold growth. So Peter MacCallum Hospital's a picture there that was painted. Almost all the new aged care homes that we specify use this SteriGuard product. So we've got the option here, which is the 2-pack, which is the ultra scrubbable, but we've also got a single pack, which is just called SteriGuard Interior, which is still very scrubbable, you know, obviously not to the same level as the 2-pack. So I guess what I wanted to just call out, and Jacob will talk to us in 2 seconds about the application differences, but there isn't a lot. And if you're painting your properties now more than ever, and you're doing the toilets yourself or you're doing the corridors yourself, SteriGuard is a really good option. We've had it from years, but it's really only come into its own now that we've got this real need for cleanliness. And we designed it for hospitals originally and aged care properties. So, you know, we'd say to you, hey, think about that option because you've got it in your price file and it's never more relevant than now. So I don't know if you want to talk about applying that versus, say, wash and wear, Jacob?
I suppose not too much, again, in application, as Alison mentioned, but kind of when I've come across doing either council walkthroughs on some of their kind of childcare facilities or even some of their office spaces, some kind of key things to think about is most of them have kind of specified wash and wear kind of early on into the design, which is really good. Some limitations of the wash and wear in comparison to the professional, even though it is that kind of trade line, is that anything that's this really washable variant of products will have issues with kind of vinyl adhesion. So if you are planning to do vinyl across your childcare facilities or in your office space, you'll actually tend to go down to this professional interior rather than wash and wear or SteriGuard. The SteriGuard itself is something if you've got really rigorous cleaning routines with kind of stronger chemicals than your normal kind of house cleaner, which wash and wear is really good with, that's when you'll kind of have to lean towards SteriGuard. So a lot of these aged care facilities, as Alison kind of touched on, have a kind of a high bleach or a similar product cleaning regime where this product will kind of outlive that. That's kind of touching on those.
Right, thanks. Again, I might zoom past the next question because I'm conscious of I want to hear your questions. I guess the question was, you know, were you aware of it? I would argue most people aren't. So, you know, again, we hope that you come out of today knowing about products that make things easier for you and that will kind of, you know, make painting less of a headache and last longer for your properties. So, last couple before we throw it over to you is flooring and line marking solutions. This is an interesting one. We sometimes find painters have trouble with flooring, and some painters will actually prefer flooring contractors to paint floors because they can get a little bit complicated. The two products we wanted to just highlight out of our range was one that we see councils using a lot of is Roadmaster. So that's for your disability bays. We've seen a lot of click and collect bays being painted recently with the in Victoria, particularly with the emergence of you know, delivery. I guess the thing to mention with this product is probably the most used line marking product in Australia because it's really fast drying and curing. And, you know, it's a chlorinated rubber resin. You get the high colour visibility. Obviously, because of the nature of wear and tear with car parks, it does need to be reapplied. We do have this other option called Luxafloor, which may be an alternative for line marking and flooring, which is a very fast cure flooring product. So this is very new, and it actually takes 24 hours to cure. Every other product, which is, you know, one of ours, is 7 days to cure. But if you've got an apartment building, or if you've got a, look, this picture here is the Westpac helicopter hangar that needs to be returned to service really quick. What a great alternative that we've got that never existed until recently. So, and as I said, can be used for line marking. I guess what we will flag there is it requires, you know, grinding back and making sure that it's completely stripped before you apply it. But hey, it will last longer than potentially Roadmaster, but it's a bit more involved. But you know, if you're finding you're always applying your line marking, always, because it keeps getting worn down, this is a new alternative that you might want to explore with us. So again, it's unlikely that you might use these yourselves, but it's really important if you are tendering these kinds of projects that you're aware of the alternatives, and you know, asking for a fast cure that will get you back into service quicker, which will, you know, obviously save money for your business. So I don't know if you want to talk very briefly, Jacob, about line marking and flooring application.
Yeah, that was pretty much summed up in terms of the surface preparation, which is kind of the key thing, especially for flooring, which is why a lot of our contractors will avoid doing it. But if it's the thing on the left that you need, definitely call us. The one on the right, I'm pretty comfortable with people using, but if you have any questions about trying to achieve kind of your council colours or disable blue or slightly different colours, just call us and we'll custom make that as much as we can to help you achieve the looks you're going for.
Good one. Question here, we might have time for this, is how likely are you to apply line marking and flooring coatings in-house? Just curious. We may as well throw it out to you. We probably scared you by saying flooring sometimes. Yeah, there we go. Not at all likely. And some people aren't sure. Again, you know, the one thing I'd say to you is to, you know, chat to us if you've got a project, and we can help you decide whether you, so people still on the fence, we can help you decide if you're not sure about applying line marking and flooring. Again, as Jacob said, line marking isn't so bad with that product. Flooring is probably another one. And we have other products other than that fast cure. We've got an Avista range, which is decorative concrete sealing products, again, which aren't as difficult to apply. So if you've got any flooring needs, please talk to us. And we can go back on to the presentation. So we probably confused some of you there who said, I don't know anymore. I was confident, but now I'm not sure. Last couple of products we wanted to talk about was anti-graffiti and heritage. Again, we're not going to go into too much detail, but we want you to know that these exist. And anti-graffiti, typically what happens nowadays, if you get graffiti in your property, you'll just paint over it with the same colour. What we find with, you know, for areas like this Eastlink, you know, noise barriers, where, you know, it's really prone to graffiti, and they don't want to paint over, particularly if you look here, this actually isn't, you know, there's a lot involved in repainting that. This is a clear coat. It's called Surface Shield, which is a water-based clear coat, which is, again, is new, because typically with anti-graffiti products, they're solvent-based, they're heavy-duty because they've got to withstand water and graffiti cleaners. But this is water-based, and it's a clear coat, and you can paint it over any kind of exterior paint, and you can remove, you can still use graffiti remover product or high-pressure water to remove graffiti off that. So if you kind of, I guess you got to weigh up between whether it's quicker for you to do a coat of paint or to have this. But if it's an area that's really prone to graffiti, we recommend using this because it will save you kind of labour in the long run, and it'll save the kind of the substrate from being coated with paint. The other thing to note, that's often the ink that graffiti is in can bleed through. And so to actually really cover it, you want to put a stain blocker and then paint. And so with this graffiti protector, you know, you don't have to worry about that bleed through of the graffiti into your second coat that you're trying to paint over with. So Jacob will talk about that in a second, and I guess a bit to think about with applying. But the other one I wanted to cover before we talk about how to apply these is Porters. Porters, as you may have seen from that first slide, is one of our brands that we own. I'm very proud of the Porters brand, but they've got a really great product for heritage properties, which allows allows vapor transmission to go in and out of this kind of heritage or older substrate. So it's really good for properties like that are older, that that we want to protect the facade and not damage it too much with coats and coats of paint. But it's such a great product. So you get a 25-year warranty for the mineral paint, so the coloured, and there's a stain, so a clear coat, which you get a 10-year warranty for. Again, suitable for heritage buildings, really great UV colour, stability, and really good algae and fungal resistance. So example there is Calais Theatre. We're really proud of that. We painted that recently. Hey, that won't need to be painted for 25 years. I know Princess Theatre has been painted here in Melbourne, but lots of heritage products are used, Porters is painted in. So if you do have heritage properties, think about this particular solution. But Jacob, I don't know if you want to just touch on the things to consider with applying either of those.
Yeah, so the Porters one will be definitely call us first. Possibly don't attempt that one yourself, because there's a fair bit to know there. The graffiti solution is just, again, finding out what works for you. So you can either, a lot of kind of councils we do work with now will either be all about doing it in a clear anti-graffiti and have a dedicated kind of wash down cycle. And some will go with just kind of stain blocking it and painting over it. Each have their kind of own limitations. The painting over might be in the same colour it was originally 4 years ago when it's purchased. So you'll get those kind of really spotty marks where they've kind of touched it up, which is kind of a limitation of the repaint style. Otherwise, you've got kind of your clear coating, which will be highly washable, but again, a different kind of technique there. But again, as always, happy to talk through what works for you on your projects.
Well, what I might do is zoom to the last question, because that's actually all for the official part, but I'm really keen to hear your questions. So I want to zoom to this last Menti question, which is there anything that I guess it's questions. One that I remember somebody mentioned that we could quickly touch on whilst Tony is just flicking to that Menti meter was rust spots. I remember somebody asked about that. Jacob, do you want to quickly summarise what's the best way to get rid of rust spots through render if you experience those?
Yeah, so kind of rust is a notoriously bad thing in general. So render, if it's render rust spots, it definitely have to come out. So it has to be picked out, primed with an epoxy, so kind of a 2-pack product there, and they're re-rendered over. The same will be for any kind of your steel coatings. The rust has to come off. We can put as much epoxy on it with rust inhibitors that we have, but if we don't kind of grind it first or wire brush it or make it super specific, blasting ideally, it'll just keep coming back. But again, 2-pack ideally is the primer. The top coat's not as important to rust as long as you're doing that primer first. Mold is one that if it's continually coming back again, both these things kind of have to be killed at the source. Mold is one where we've got kind of techniques on how to get rid of it, but then choosing the right primer is really specific. So oil-based stains will go through oil-based coatings and water-based stains will go through water-based coatings, and mold will try to go through both of them. So we've got, again, a water-based, pretty simple to use epoxy that you can prime with. That is, again, water-based though, so easy to use and low odour, which will kill most of that mold and stop that from coming through. And then cracking, again, will be top coat.
Yeah, so I guess that's probably a lot of info there in those answers, but what we'd say to you is talk to us about it's really important to get the right primer to get rid of so we recommend getting rid of the rust and then putting a really good blocking primer before you put a top coat on, and that's where we kind of get specific about primers, and again, we've got our details on the next slide that we can talk to you about if you have a specific issue. But I guess the message to take away with rust is if you paint over it, it's still going to come out. It's, as with any building issue, it will because it just keeps penetrating the coating. And same with mold. Again, you know, getting rid of mold is really important. But you know, a good stain blocker over a mold stain when the mold has been removed can stop it from coming through. A great primer we've got is called Precision, stain and mold and Precision Stain Blocker. The name's got mold, I think, in it. But again, we recommend contacting us to help with that, because there's a little bit we can talk to you about, hey, making sure you get rid of the mold before you paint over it, because those stains keep penetrating that. Even if the mold is gone, the stain will potentially penetrate that substrate. And that cracking question was, if there's one thing we'd say, make sure you use Acra Shield or Acra Skin to be able to paint over cracks. If they're big cracks, there's a little bit more involved. There's a bit more of potentially a mesh system that we recommend if they're really big. But if they're hairline cracks, those Acra Shield and Acra Skin products that we talked about before will cover it, and will bridge that crack. Any other questions? So I guess the one thing we'll kind of end on, which if you hopefully you're still around to take note, is we would say, if you're thinking about painting and it isn't your stock standard kind of, quick interior repaint, give us a call. So, and actually in partnership with your Procurement Australia relationship manager, give them a call, which we know you know who they are, and they're there to help, and they can bring us in to help you with those. Particularly if you've got a project that is going to be sizable and is going to involve a bit of different products. We've got our details on the left there, but again, contact us or your account manager, and we're only too happy to help. And it's free. It's free for you guys because you're a preferred client of ours. So you don't have to know all of the details of paint that we've given you. You can just call us and we'll help you. So unless, I don't know, Tony, if that Mentimeter has got any more questions we haven't answered from before. But we hope we've been able to answer some of your questions or give you a bit more of a broad summary of the different categories of paint, and would love to hear your feedback and love to hear what else you might like help with from us for future sessions.